Have you ever looked at a bird and thought, gee, if only it were 100 feet tall, with jaws full of sharp teeth and giant wings that could carry it through the skies? No, just me then. But you might have looked at an eagle and thought, if only it weren't a bird, it would make a pretty good dinosaur. Now maybe that's not just you. Maybe we're all subconsciously aware that birds are actually just little flying cousins of the great theropod dinosaurs like Velociraptor and Tyrannosaurus rex. Or maybe we're all just crazy. But either way, this is actually true. Hi, it's me and this is my channel. Let us dive into the amazing world of birds and find out how they really are related to dinosaurs. It turns out the link between dinosaurs and birds is much stronger than most people think. In fact, birds aren't just related to dinosaurs, they're literally part of the dinosaur family tree. And there's a wealth of fossils that support this wild idea. The earliest direct ancestors of modern birds were feathered dinosaurs called theropods. Theropods were a diverse group of mostly carnivorous dinosaurs that lived during the Mesozoic era, which is otherwise known as the Age of Dinosaurs. They first appeared in the Triassic period about 230 million years ago, and by the Jurassic, they had become the dominant terrestrial vertebrates on the planet. This group included iconic species like the small, agile Velociraptor and the huge, fearsome Tyrannosaurus rex. But by the end of the Cretaceous, they were completely gone, or were they? Sometime in the late Jurassic or early Cretaceous, likely around 150 million years ago, a small group of feathered theropods took to the sky for the first time. They didn't fly exactly like birds do today. Instead, they glided, jumping from tree to tree, maybe even using their feathers for balance and steering while gliding.
Oh, man.
But regardless of how exactly they moved through the air, these dino-birds were the ancestors of every winged creature that has flown since. Okay, maybe not technically every single one. I'm sure there was some other tiny proto-bird out there doing its own thing. But for the purposes of this video, let's just say birds. And these aren't just birds in the sense that they look kind of like birds. Modern genetic analyses suggest that they are so closely related to modern birds that it makes more sense to call them birds themselves. The problem is that the fossil record from this time isn't great. We haven't found many well-preserved specimens from this crucial point in evolutionary history. We don't know exactly what the transition from feathered dinosaur to bird looked like. And because of this gap in the fossil record, scientists have been arguing over the exact definition of bird for decades. But luckily, we have a few key fossils that show us the characteristics we need to fill in the blanks. One of the best examples comes from the famous site of Lugar Velho in Portugal. In 1994, paleontologists discovered the remains of a small animal that was only about the size of a pigeon. At first, they thought it was just another small dinosaur like a Compsognathus. But when they carefully cleaned and examined the bones, they realized that they had something very special. This tiny dino-bird had feathers. Not only did it have feathers, but it also had all of the skeletal features we associate with birds today, like a wishbone and furcula. So it was clearly a theropod dinosaur. This discovery was so important because it showed that feathers evolved before flight in dinosaurs. So these animals weren't furry for warmth or camouflage. They were furry because they were evolving to fly. This mysterious dino-bird was given the name Archaeopteryx, which means oldest wing. And it turned out that the specimen discovered in Portugal wasn't the only one. Over the years, several other Archaeopteryx fossils have been found, all of them in southern Germany. And collectively, they've taught us a lot about the origin of birds. For example, some of them still have the imprints of feathers on their skin, giving us valuable insight into what these long-lost creatures looked like. And the best preserved specimen, known as the Berlin specimen, shows that Archaeopteryx had feathers all over its body, not just on its wings. In fact, it looks kind of like a feathered velociraptor, except its feathers are a lot longer and fluffier. These feathers weren't capable of powered flight, but they definitely helped this animal move through the trees. But as it turns out, Archaeopteryx wasn't the only group of dino-birds trying to take to the skies. Recent research suggests that birds actually evolved from multiple separate groups of feathered dinosaurs in a process called Convergent Evolution. And one of these groups was the Troodontids. Troodontids were small, feathered dinosaurs that lived in what is now North America and Asia during the late Cretaceous. They were closely related to the famous horned dinosaurs like Triceratops, but instead of growing horns, they grew feathers. And like Archaeopteryx, they probably used their feathers to glide from tree to tree. But there's one troodontid that stands out from the rest, Oharintani, about 70 million years ago. A team of paleontologists unearthed a fossil of a trudentont from the genus Oharintani in Canada. But the strange thing about this fossil is that it had fully feathered wings and a tail. That's right, wings. It's not that there had never been feathered dinosaurs before, but this was the first clear-cut example of a dino-bird that was truly capable of powered flight. It looks like a mix between a velociraptor and an eagle. And it's one of the best examples we have of the evolution of flight in dinosaurs. And as it turns out, the origin of bird flight might be more complicated than we originally thought. In 2019, researchers looked at the fossil of a relative of Ankylosaurus in hopes of learning more about how feathers evolved. What they found surprised them. It turned out that feathers don't actually evolve only once, like we thought. They evolved multiple times in different groups of dinosaurs. Because they were so widespread, they must have been very beneficial for dinosaurs. Feathers may have helped dinosaurs attract mates, regulate their body temperature, and protect themselves from the sun. But as you might have guessed, feathers were also critical for flight. In fact, in this one fossil alone, the researchers were able to identify at least 4 separate instances of feather evolution. And 2 of those feathers were located on the wings. So birds really did evolve multiple times from different ancestral populations. And yet today, there's only one type of bird. In a way, the story of birds is similar to that of mammals. Mammals also evolved from a group of reptiles, but they became so different from their reptilian relatives that we wouldn't recognize them as such today. In fact, scientists have even proposed that birds should be classified in their own category along with mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. Of course, there's a lot of pushback against this idea, but maybe someday birds will be classified. Separately from reptiles and dinosaurs, we'll finally get to rest in peace. Speaking of resting in peace, that brings us to the last piece of the bird-dinosaur puzzle, the origin of the avian. You see, unlike mammals, birds are known for having teeth. Okay, not really. Modern birds don't have teeth. Yeah. Their mouths are just filled with a bunch of hard, pointed stuff that makes it easier for them to rip up food. But this isn't exactly how it started. In the early days of bird evolution, they had teeth. And not just any teeth, but a bunch of tiny teeth that lined the roof of their mouths. These teeth weren't useful for tearing apart their food, but they did make it easier to hold on to their food while they tore it apart with their beaks. Scientists think that these teeth may have been connected to feathers. After all, feathers grow out of the same embryonic tissue as teeth do, and they appear at roughly the same time in development. So birds may have lost their teeth after they started flying. See, when you're soaring through the air at high speeds, having a bunch of pointy teeth sticking out of your mouth is pretty dangerous. But you can always just pull them out, right? Nope. Toothless birds lay eggs, and eggs need to be made of calcium to keep them from getting crushed by predators. And calcium, as it turns out, is also the main component of teeth. So losing teeth allowed birds to lay stronger eggs. This, combined with the lightweight beaks that we see in birds today, means that birds can fly without getting crushed or being crushed. So there you have it. Thanks to some recent discoveries in paleontology, we now know that birds are the direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs like Velociraptor and Tyrannosaurus rex, and they have been around since the late Jurassic, longer than the entire Cretaceous period. So next time you hear someone say that dinosaurs never existed, just point to the birds and be like, ha, in your face, non-believers. Clearly, dinosaurs exist. They're right there. You can't deny it. Oh wait, are they trilobites? Wow, now I feel silly. Okay, thanks for watching. See you next time.